Testing, testing. Okay. Yeah. So what? And there's a camera there.
Right there, yeah.
We are live. Okay. Thanks for telling me. Yeah. Good to go? Hello? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello? Hello. Hi everyone, how's it going? How are you feeling? Is it warm enough? Is it wintry enough? Is there enough poetry? All right, we're all set. We're all set. Welcome to the final event of our Saturday night of the Winter Warm, right? Thanks for being here. And I'm really excited to introduce two great performers tonight. First, we're going to have Kim Shuck joining us via Zoom. We're going to have Aindrias Staic, who's somewhere, there he is. So tá fáilte roh ga céine, Tánaí seo chuir núil ag forras na Gaeilge cumá, agus bhaimí takeíocht dó forras na Gaeilge, dábhar sin beag roiint doníthe ag chuir núil as Gaeilge anocht. So first, I'm going to just jump right in and introduce Kim Shuck, who is ready to go, I believe. So Kim Shuck is a writer, bead artist, iconoclast, social awkward, and an increasingly silly series of proteins. I didn't write that. She served as the 7th Poet Laureate of San Francisco. Kim is a solo author of 11 books and has edited, co-edited, assistant edited, been edited adjacent, or been edited curious for 11 anthologies. Her latest collection of poems is Pick a Garnet to Sleep in Scapegoat Press. And you're very welcome, Kim Shuck. Please give a warm welcome to her. Enjoy.
Thank you. No, she didn't write that. I did. The whole thing about the big list of your accomplishments, particularly for a reading, has never seemed to matter much to me since, you're about to prove it or not prove it. So let's get on with it. Blood of September, Antietam echoes louder than in years. Burning the sacred wood, you can still smell cordite. We come in on one of these days, an illusion of unity, just one alone, rattling in the dance can, just the one, a narrow prayer that doesn't carry far. Ideas meet and part, leave a piece behind. Behind a poem might be histamine reaction, winding thought like an old analog clock. Where is the key? The key to this approach, an antidote to distance. It always comes back to healing, a thing of one at a time, a thing of specificity, a hand, another hand, ideas in small numbers, kissing, catalyzing, retreating. Squirrel chase in the oaks between the wind and the mammals, we are pelted with the small acorns of this watershed. Live oaks, potential tree, food, rot, heaven, earth, abyss, and the squirrel presents me. What number can symbolize human life? What is the body count? Events, policies happen on a large scale, but suffering happens in the nerves of each. A spasm, a loss, the relentless news of searching for a cousin, then a body, a fact, a first principle construction as unlikely as Burgess Shale or the shattered ice dam that changes the landscape forever. These daily sums are baffling. This measure of malice will buy some amount of attention equals existing, that this weight of things around us spectacular, fleck them with daily miracles, the hawk, the crows, beings who create the day from dark to dark, deep swallow in the transition times. House, mind space, the intangible that clings to walls, to framing, trailing fingers through Janice's beads, a transmitted memory of boots, a luxury. We face the eucalyptus. We imagine the stairs. We understand the synthesis. Wandered off in a frog made of mischief and words swallowing one another. One, you can hear the river under the ground here, the river clinging red legs and salmon, a sound that paints down to the bone in local lessons and sacred responsibilities, a place where authority is translated as care, not in honors and bruises. Gardens set aside, this public space unusable by the public. Canvas, chatter, and repeatedly displaced dancers, mourners, wander, scatter to find new perches. We're the new corvids of the bay, the excluded hearts, the thumb-polished, use-worn, cradled and stuttering poem in ink and cotton. We are prey here in the windy afternoon, in the sanctuary of one another. Days shuffle and translate. Imagine gluing your thoughts to the wall. Well, today I will think in sunrise and buttons, make prayer chords from landmarks and discards, the sung and hummingbirds down here among these tiny pomegranates, each inner voice a morning mother, a dance tipped with red fingers. I can't remember where the stars were when your words caught me by surprise. The weaving, the water held there, a willingness to believe sometimes that arc of other weavers, something glimmers just like that. Reflection on a polished volcanic glass shard. The edges are left thick, less threat than musing. The way we look into someone's memory, the way we look when there is no threat, the way we can be treasured, released, rearticulated, a thing of hands and pride. Now is when you learn to step over the creek. Here, when the redwoods sing, they pull cold darkness with them. The sometime crows, the feet on the path, so many have worn their favorite equations there. New moon in September, a serpent, a couple of ghost frogs on the lip of the pond that plays hide and seek. We rock against the shore by song, by imagination, knowing she's there, knowing like a child that the water is there before the trust is broken. Watch the sky. It's tradition at this time of year, a thing that could be a crowbar or a hot meal, but is most often else that won't cooperate. We bring our arguments with us, planets seeming to change direction, but the conversations don't get any clearer. It's a learned antagonism. Your joys unmet might be medicated by emotional violence. We've watched you do it, are among those who are welcome to the air if we promise not to breathe. So we pull on the old stories like flannel and slippers, hope that we carry in blood and pockets a particular wave of hair, a life lesson, a body shock. We sleep soundly in a permanent setting of the limbic system, what we are expected to accept, decorated in all of those charming cultural details. Children who were given to the forest know each other on sight. We've held hands in the dark, learned to love the bat chirp frenzy in our teen years, left fingerprints on one another's skin. We cherish one another's keening heartbeats. We hear them at distance. We are neither silent nor known, this resonant and numberless clan. Today it was clear. The next light shed, the warm light returned, the early communications from the utility company and the universe. Eventually, you leave some footprints. That's all. Walking on outside edges, we might be eventually a tracker. Comes a tracker who will see beyond cloak or careful feet. Your joys and pains are clear here in the September light. You know how it is. Blood trace and beads. These are strength moves. And when they tell the story later, the shake in your muscle won't show. The tremor is distracting as they are. This endless rope tied together words. Surely there were never so many in your mouth. Surely it's a sleight of hand. Because these and other tricks quietly bleeding, these handprints, you know that we can use any rock or window or stair tread as an eye. Call it gaining perspective. And those who believe that even this pain is some kind of theft. A diagram of prayer paintings, the invocations overlap. This is a song of uncertainty, but faith, the frog of timing, the frog of distractions, a snake of prayers. These are stories translated from the original in Bay Frog, good water that still moves under the pavement, the pavement. It's a surface broken by painted flowers and imagined cornstalk roots. Hummingbird still there on the power lines, watching me through the window, watching me perform for a video conference, wing twitch and kiss cry. She sips water from the fern tree. How imported I am with tea and chocolate, a bag of veggies over one shoulder, riding imaginary rails bound for home, right? Heading for home, right? To the hummingbird, a female, less feather than flash, but she's been here for 2 days, supervising as I build poem nests of lichen and spiderweb. It's too bright in this place for poems, but after dark, the LED streetlights don't hit the pavement, and we can whisper our part-time realities to the raccoons and the mosquitoes when malice shattered and sent shards of unease just everywhere. Sing me your songs, misunderstood neighbor, and hear mine. It's too bright here. Some days the reflection off the fog, the glass windows downtown, the visible bone reflecting indifference. So sit down for a moment and tell me all about it. We blow lightly on a handful of self and watch it go darker, an anti-coal. Let the chill soak flesh. These dreams, miscommunications translated into many languages, including another woman's skin, a handful of self beats softly against palm rhythms of every loved song, every strained connection, the hermit gene, what hides under the leaves, what hides in plain sight. It's funny the way we carry September in the blood. The poets, well, we know after the reading, the ones who read, the ones we read, the close encounters trying to put community back together, scrap and scrap. The seams and seeming, the knots, the blackmail, the dark threats, the turn of a season. Hours of survive, self-twist, strings of words around fingers, pass them hand to hand, changed, pass them hand in hand, the game, the insight, the rummage. Someone's cards and bracings creak, challenge step and step towards the harvest moon. The man rejects violence, but he understands the threat to bomb an event with children. This harvest, this sharp with cinnamon and ginger, this collection of fraud, the bracings, the structure shift. Harvest walks the streets. Finally, the light shifted, the warm angles adding protective spice to our baked apples, and the way that the wind comes up and the deaf cat on the back step. We listen for the truth behind the curtain. We listen back of the throat and toe tips. The word veils thin in this sunshine. The memory of slipping our moorings, sneaking past the cyclone fencing, and the vibrations of the scrying bay up through the wood and into our bones. Stand before the hillside in a jacket of your own outdoor. The remake. The remake. We have songs for this. We have ceremony. We have sacred responsibility to pull these evolved identities on like armor. We stand before these altars, before these neighbors, and we tell the hostile powers, it's enough. unwind the codes of earlier days. We were illegal, prohibited, the protective paintings on the roof beams, the basket patterns in the altar cloth, our sacred dances forbidden, modified into social dances. And we, these new generations, detangle, rearrange, bring question after question to the answers they left us in love and gratitude in song. Fennel seeds and candles, the clarity of September, drying cackles splitting under the harvest moon. Aconite wrapped in paper lay words to disarm the bullies, to unpick the knots of sacrifice, the leak of color in eclipse, the shiver of patterned skin, the shift of power from force to settle. The sounds of water and coast, the sound of seeds rest, the veils that thin collect the story. September. Pulling into October in the wake of a full moon, in the light of planets, of more news from residential schools, the kitchen rainbows before noon, and the whiplash between small comforts now and attempted genocide ongoing. It aches me, this cinnamon month, as it shakes free of the husk of a dry, flammable September. In the language of coastal moths, the word for fire also means yearning. And to the people who chase them, the word for moth means just out of reach. And because they often fly around a certain kind of outdoor light, we will call those lamps moths and lean into their flickering. And ritual round, coaxing for the release of their seeds. The fire's too hot for that now, too fed by import fodder, grass, and bolted decorative potential torches. Wind is indiscriminate. It loves rain, fog, bridges, caresses bay surface, ocean, cliff face. It lifts the returning pelicans, the checker spot butterflies. It stirs and pants and moans the trees and new railings, and lends frenzy to the wildfires, offers us smoke that is an unfamiliar prayer, bark peeled trees perched anxious along this crawling coast. Wrapped in sacred numbers, and who will count the individual flames this season? A desperate fortune telling. This string is held between hands, potential burnings. We release one loop at a time to see who the new child will be. A different burning time, the fuel piled against remembering trees and ancestor blood, the crack and crack of each year marker here in the control, the stone rimmed, here near the storytelling, the danger, the twitch and fret of things learned hard, the cup and sing in a long contract time. It pulls apart along the seams, an imaginary friend. Relatives framed in orange and black, the smell of drying acorn, of smoked fish, and this is a way of making a prayer, setting an intention. These are rituals, these shivers along selected stories, what the old peppernut tree taught about empathy and borrowed wisdom of a cast iron pan. We throw words and seeds, we throw a learned balance, a joy, a struggle into each thing that nourishes, into each startle of change, into a prayer fire, a storytelling fire. We're a collaboration that started with single cells and gathered like firewood, like these piled assaults and years. Ice is not the opposite of fire, not from any angle. Things that start fire are also not the opposite of fire. Either this coast of tectonics and song I have carried, dance sage, a gift from right next to the skin. We shift the mountain, the spring on top of the hill where the intentions puddle and spill, and the butterflies find new perches. The exposed cypress roots and the handful of praying sand that slipped between them, flexible at the crest. That everything is an invitation, that sacred stone, anti-fire, arcane poem. And I don't know how to measure poem either, handful but this isn't a page, by the number of lines, by what the poems are not fires, but might start them. Some fires selected and fasted over a healing, the weaving, a new poem to be whispered to the creek. The creek we stir in the morning, listening to the slip of the fault. The coast is a cooperative of the shattered, an uneasy compromise, a slip, a difficult poem to measure. Here we float on liquid rock, more earthquakes than ever, and the chant not our fault, but here we are. Strike, slip, the crawling coast, the fires, the droughts, and the land shiver, the ticks and twitches of change, and the reaction, strike, slip. The extractions, the depletions, stone deep ache, the time, the molten shift, but no fire. It can start the making some. The history from itself, tree ring or rock layer, water spun boulder or molten ice, not the opposite of fire. More birds. And north of here, the land has opened up and gulped a cow. The fence shift, a lesson about fences and about the ways a maze can change the healing plants gone scarce. The symbolic breaths of lungless salamanders coiled into orange songs in this season of fire. Some night, the air hot enough to crack seed pods, a sound like movie house popcorn, and there the yellow flowers gone to black pods that spit shiny black punctuation yards from the mother tree, or all at once a rain of conifer seeds complete with their own sails, a swarm of nut bugs, a flight of seeds in the heat. Home is an erratic rhythm, a heartbeat, jazz, the river under, the blacktop again and again, the river that still sings salmon, and sometimes of year, an old song of a red hawk, a hawk of longing laboring through this Pacific wind. What follows this relocated heart? Here the earth moves, and south of here the volcanoes, another measure of change, a clock that knows the spin of earth and falling seed. Do we fall faster now as the change comes? As the change comes, and the volcanoes tell time. And I was wrong. I had enough time to read both of them. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, Gurmila Margaret. Next up, I'm going to introduce our next performer for tonight, Aindrias Staic. He asked me just to introduce him, just tell him I'm a storyteller, that's all, just tell him. But I'll tell you a few more things. So is Scaly, Beiladorasor, is Kjoltor, as Erhar Nahiran, Aindrias Staic. He's a storyteller, folklorist, and musician from the west of Ireland, and one of the few storytellers in Ireland who works in both the English and Irish languages. He's won awards from the Edinburgh Fringe, the New Zealand Fringe, and has enjoyed roles on London's West End and Dublin's Abbey Theatre. He inherited his storytelling ability from his late father, Eddie Staic, who was also a storyteller musician from County Clare. So without further ado, I'll leave you in the very capable hands of Aindrias Staic. Enjoy.
How's it going? Some of you are still here, that's great. Gurmila Margaret, agus Gurmila Margaret, Paul, agus Michelle, agus Chulaguna Brendan, agus Chulaguna Gatina, a will go bron show, Smahan Archie, agus Smahan Rode, agus Smahan Fela. I've learnt more about poetry today than I have in a long time, so it's great listening around. As Michelle said, yeah, it's more storytelling. I'm delighted to be here because out for dinner there with the poets and people talk about books and getting published, and it's great to see all the great merch. I don't have any books or CDs or anything. I did a CD years ago and it got slated by the academics. They said in the Journal of Music Ireland, the JMI, would be a great middle class mag for the jazz aficionados. And they said said that Aindrias does not know what to do with his instrument, you know. What? Am I not allowed to say that? Is this live on the internet? Is this live on the internet as well? Sorry. And just rewind that bit there. Yeah. Is it all right? Like moving? Oh, yeah. Anyway, sure, look, I'll shut up giving out. And I'll tear into a story. Right. Out across Liscannor Bay, out from the seaside town of Lahinch, deep, deep, deep down under the waves of the sea, lies the sunken village of Kilshtafeen. And it isn't known why, time nor tide nor waters wide can tell, but every so often, for no reason whatsoever, but the village of Kilshtafeen might suddenly rise up out of the sea. And the first thing that would come up out of the ocean would be the spire of the church of Kilshtafeen, and all the bells ringing. Run home, the young people were told. Run home out of that. For if you were to see the spire of the church rising up out of the ocean and to hear the bell ringing, you'd surely die within the year. Now you might think this is all pishrock, premonition, made up kind of stuff, old folklore, wives' tales, but no, it actually happened. There was a family over there in Clahan, two brothers. Now they were great musicians. Both played fiddle, the Daidler and the Bronach. And the Daidler would be a happy-go-lucky kind of a musician. He'd be didling away a few tunes. He'd be like, he was like that, happy-go-lucky music all the time. If he was around today now, he'd be like a DJ, playing like, I don't know, a Fatboy Slim or 90s classics or something, or maybe even karaoke, who knows? Banging it out like good crack. Great musician to dance to, he was. But his brother, the Bronach, was a sad, melancholic kind of a musician. He'd be like, he was way over yonder in the minor key. If he was around today now, he'd be above in the International Bar in Dublin with all the singer-song whiners. Yeah, gee, I'm sure I've noticed plenty of him here in Cork as well. But anyway, he was like that. But anyway, as you could imagine, they had two very different kinds of music. And it was rare that they could ever play any tune together. In fact, one time a tune drifted in from Scotland. Where's the Scots lads? Oh, of course, Scots pub. Anyway, a tune drifted in from Scotland called Dark Loch Nigal. It was a great tune, but they couldn't play that tune together. There was a fight over that tune still. But one night, they were coming home from a wake, and they were didling away a tune between the two of them. And they got up in the morning to play the tune together. Well, you see, they couldn't play the tune together. They had the same first part, but they had different second part. They'd go. When they go into the second part, well, the Daidler would dial up into a kind of a happy kind of a part, and the Bronach would be pulling these weird minor chords out of another part, you know, and it was going on so long that they couldn't seem to play the tune together at all. And then what happened was they decided late in the evening then, they decided late in the evening then that they'd have to decide who was right and who was wrong. They'd have to row across the bay to a man who knew all the tunes and all the songs. It was decided, that's it. They'd go across the bay to Murty Flanagan. And Murty was a relation of my own who lived down in Barthra. That'd be an island off the coast of Milltown, Malbay, I would say. It's only about 4 miles across the sea. But they agreed anyway, whoever had the wrong version of the tune, would be the one of them that had to row the boat back on his own. That they had to have a sleep. Grand. They were both pretty confident they had the right version of the tune anyway. And the boat went across the sea anyway. After a while, they got over the 4 miles across the sea and they knocked on the door. Murty Flanagan's house, and Murty up and said, "Oh, monsieur, come in, let you," he said, "God between us and all harm, but what as you hear at this queer hour of the night?" He said, "We're fighting over the second half of a tune." So Murty was well used to these lads fighting. "Come in," he said, "come in." So in they came anyway, and he raked up the fire, and sure, of course there was no internet, Facebook or TikTok in them days, so I had to exhaust every topic of conversation, first births, deaths, marriages, football, hurling, hay, turf, all the usual topics of the day. After a few hours, Murty said, "Right now," he said, "it's getting late, let's hear this tune." So the Diddler went first with his version of the tune. He went, and Murty Flanagan said nothing. "And yourself now, Bronnach?" So then Bronnach went with his version. "Oh my God," said Murty Flanagan. "Oh my God, Bronnach. Oh my God, that second part, the way you went high up like that and came down and curled around on the note and the G and pulled it back into the chord. Oh my God, it's absolutely beautiful, but it's wrong." "Wrong?" says Bronnach. "How could my beautiful tune be wrong? How could it be wrong?" And he was kicking the wall and getting a strippers, and Murty said, "No, look, it's not the way it is played. Everyone knows this tune's like a version of Drowsy Maggie. This is the way it goes into the major second half." So anyway, late at night anyway, the lads were leaving. Murty gave them a hand with the boat. He gave the boat a good push, and I went out, and sure the Dider said, "Look, sir, I was right and you were wrong, so I'll have you sleep now." And the Dider went into sleep on the boat. Poor old Bronnach had to row the boat in his own. And it was a tough row against the tide. He was pulling at the oars and pulling at the oars and pulling, and eventually the boat took off. And it was going nicely across the sea, like a knife going through hot butter. But then suddenly, what should happen then? But the wind blew. Oh, and the wind blew again. When the wind blew a third time, woo! And suddenly the currach was high up on a wave like this, and suddenly it was down low with a big wave about to come down on top of it, and suddenly the currach was high up on a wave like this, and suddenly it was down low with a big wave about to, and suddenly it was high up on a wave. And then, at that point, what should suddenly come up out of the sea? Yes, only the spire of the church in Kilstafine, with all the bells ringing in it. "Wake up, Diddler, wake up, we're dead for sure." But there was no waking the Diddler. "Wake up, Diddler, we're dead." And the currach heading straight for Kilstafine. In fact, the Bronnach was there in the currach, and he could see the village of Kilstafine, the church, the people, and outside the church and the steeple, he could see all the people, and they're calling to him closer and closer. He was getting to the village of Kilstafine. And then luckily what happened? The wind blew. And at that point then, a famous wave that some of the surfers may know, this wave called Aliens Wave. You'll see it on magicseaweed.com or some of the surf apps. Came in. This great wave came around the cliffs of Moher, and it picked up the currach and brought it home, just like you'd see a surfboard coming in, and landed them home. As they stepped out of the boat, the Dider said, "Bronnach, I had an awful dream. I had a dream that you had seen Kilstafine." "I have seen Kilstafine." And of course, word spread around the village, up to the Scanner, down to Lahinch and over to Doolin. And then, the next few weeks, a strange thing happened. Well, the Bronnach, who had always been so sad, well, he accepted his fate. He said, "He was going to die." He said, "Sure, look at it, we're all going to die. Is there one of us in this room tonight who's not going to die?" No, exactly, it's fact. Anyway, but the Dider, who had always been so happy, he kind of got sad now, because his brother was going to die within the year. And then, over the next few weeks, people would be taking out the Bronnach. They'd be taking him out and asking him, "What did you see below in Kilstafine?" They'd be bringing him up to the pub or calling to the house, having tea, and he'd say, "I saw the Magpie was a boat that went missing years ago. There was another trawler called the Marianne. I saw the Marianne. I saw the sunken gold of the Spanish Armada. They'd say, did you see the wild cow that jumped off the cliffs of Moher? Faith, and I did, he said, I saw it. The Bow Braddock, he said, I saw it. It came off the cliffs of Moher. I've seen it all. The sunken treasure of the Spanish Armada. The castle and crew of the Plassey, a boat that went up on the Aran Islands. I seen it all. He said, gold. And did you see the barrels of brandy from the Portuguese vessels? I did, he said. What wasn't brandy? It was cognac. I seen it all. And then one morning, when the guider came down for his breakfast, he was eating his egg, just taking the top off his egg like this. But there was a strange kind of a breeze blowing in around the kitchen window and the curtains. And he turned around and he was looking for the Bronach. No sign of the Bronach. Went up to the bedroom and he opened the door. And there was the Bronach inside in the bed. Gone. No sign of him. So they went down to the Clahan, to the shore, looked for the Curragh. There it was. Gone. No sign of it. So they sent out a bit of a search party then. A few trawlers went out from the scanner and Doolin and they looking around for the Curragh. And even the Doolin rescue helicopter, which was new at the time. And there it was, out from the seaside town of Lahinch. There was the Curragh and it bobbing up and down on the waves. Lumpadon, Lampadon, Lumpadon, Lampadon, Lumpadon, Lampadon, Lumpadon, Lampadon. But there was no sign of the Bronach, for he was gone back to Kilstafine. But the funny thing about it is when we play that tune now in Clare, it's the Bronach's version of the tune that we play. So maybe it was him and the right version of the tune all along. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. It's such a great honour to be here at O'Vale. It's the literary tradition. I'm quite dyslexic, so I'm of the illiterate. I struggle a bit with reading and writing, but Nora vi Paula Kanslum vi Shiralem Beder Rodikincha Yenu in Elga. Agus Tashi Soler Gwil Golior then tradition, like a lot of the stories and songs I have come from the Irish language tradition as well. I was lucky that Nora Vimage Color School, I went to school in the Gaeltacht on the Mayo Galway border. So she kind of Canuch Weo Tagamsa. And then when we were young, there was so much music and stories from my father's side in Clare, but when my father went to America and I grew up in Mayo, I had to kind of go the extra mile to find all that magic and music in South Mayo, and a lot of that kind of lived Sheerabore, back the road, behind Cong, the Mayo Gaeltacht, Cong, Turmakidi, Cong, Crossdeneel, Finney, all this lovely, colourful Gaeltacht that you don't really hear about, because in the West we're very dominated by the stronger Gaeltacht areas like Unspidgale and Connemara and the County Galway Gaeltacht. But much of the magic in the Mayo Gaeltacht was to be found. So Shinna Fáil Gula and Couple Focal Gael Gagam. Noravima Jog, when I was young, we lived in Galway City, and I had the name Aindrias to Staic, and people in the city used to say, it was a housing estate on the Chum Road, and they go, how's it going? What's your name? Aindrias to Staic? That's a stupid name. And I just wanted to fit in. So I used to say, after a while, I would say to people, my name is Jack Burke. And it's funny because when I was in Melbourne, I knew a man from Iran and his name was Muhammad something, but he used to say, George is my name. There was that kind of colonization. But it's amazing that even as a child, I didn't want to have this strange name. I just wanted to be Jack Burke. My name is Jack Burke, and I wanted to have boots, and I wanted to be working with concrete. I didn't want to be, the son of like a poet or any of that crack, or a storyteller, or I didn't want to be the son of hippies. And my father used to come to the door and he'd say, don't be slagging him. His name is Aindrias. He's named after a famous Clare poet from Mullach. And like Moloch is this tiny village of like 2 pubs, which is about 4 miles outside Milltown, Malbay, you know. And I never really took it that seriously. And by the time we moved to Mayo, then my father went to San Francisco. That's why it was interesting to connect with the previous poet there from San Francisco, with Kim, where there was so much beat poetry and all that. And over the years, I would become familiar with poetry through and a lot of Irish music through San Francisco. When you see it from that angle, you appreciate it. But when I moved to Mayo, it must have been around the time of Mexico '86, you know. And Mayo were playing Argentina in the World Cup final. No, not Mayo. Sorry, England. Sorry. This is going out live all over the world as well, which is great. Getting caught. Sorry, who was it? England and Argentina. Yeah, in the World Cup. And Mayo had the connection with Argentina from Admiral Brown. So anyway, huh? Okay, but was there not a final between England and... Yeah, that's it. Great, yeah. So anyway, it was huge. So my name is Aindrias, which is the Irish for Andrew. And Munster, you know, there's Aindrias Moynihan here in Cork, a politician, and there's Attorney General Aindrias. But as we'll go to, what I'm trying to get is there was loads of poets called Aindrias as well, which is why my name. But when I went to Mayo, it was Mexico '86 was the big World Cup. And then there was Argentina, and all the Mayo people had the connection with Argentina. And there was, let's say, for want of a better term, in the 80s, the time of the hunger strikes, there was kind of an anti-English sentiment. So when I got there, they were like, Andre, Iba. So when I meet people from Mayo, they go, how are you, Andres? They pronounce the name like that, which I kind of like. I got into it. You grow into your name as you get older. But since I've moved back to Clare, I get roped into these Irish language projects, just where people have the funding and they don't know how to do with it. So I kind of get dragged into these things. But they often ask me to do poems by this guy, Andris Machrutin. So he's this like 17th century poet, you know. And when I first started doing this, it wasn't, I'll be reading it, so no video on please, because it's difficult. It didn't make sense to me, you know. I was like, you know, the way 17th century doesn't make, 17th century poetry in Old Irish can be difficult. But during COVID, I had a research grant to research rhythm in Irish storytelling. So a lot of my story, like you've heard, does Lopadan, Lapadan, and bringing in the tunes. But in some of the old kind of slow poems that were songs, they were kind of, in some cases, an air might exist. Like in this case, we might say the air of Jimmy Mavilish Thor. Like Raftery, the Mayo poet, who went with his fiddle. So in the bardic tradition, which was talked about earlier by the Scotsman and the other poet, and I think what they mentioned was when harps disappeared, they often started to use pipes. I think that was said in the previous session. And we often think that in places like Mayo and Clare, when harps disappeared, whether it was through Cromwell or the poverty in general, they often found fiddles, which is why you'd have Raftery on fiddle. Raftery on fiddle used the fiddle in Mayo. Merryman, the poet Eanes Timon, and also in East Clare used the fiddle. And in this case, Andres Machrutin, whether he toured with a harpist or not. So I'm just going to do, I won't do too much of it, like, because Tasha Jacker, Tasha Delhi, it's difficult. But I'll do it here and then we'll go through the translation of it. So it's more Mogonas. So it's another poet kind of given out. I'll try it anyway. Is more Mogonas, mar cholasa gorgin shre. Es ma foca eglu no mangins bre. Ma chota eglu es eglogalar latin kle. Es gar sawel no gofri no dekini me. A oil sla for fohagu in rirel. Jiwar slacht halal en fohano fili direct. Na Johan and Olof a velako hosko jive. Esto gumijana vada harnash go kilki me. Is nar gawes aram an connor nar vornion me. I gosh ar follows mo creve cwn crechin re. Malior David gorwogus dam scragin scre. Is kjol to dam bohu con chalaf vi chulchin she. Is togum yan vadach harnash go kilki me. Is a togon yan vadach harnash go kilki me. Thank you. Sorry, I should have probably given you the translation before I went into the old 17th century Irish. So it's basically, when he says, it's more mogunus, isn't it sad upon me that I'm here in Gurchin Schley, a small tillage field on the side of the mountain, a poker full of empty pockets, like Rafty and Philip, pokey full of Ganlino no mangreen spray, without lining or mangreen spray. Spray would be an old word for a dowry. You don't say, you see your one over there, if you talk nice to her, no, you get the spray off her father. I used to think it was like a wee, a big spray, but it's actually, it's dowry. Mochota ag lomos ag lugol a Latin clef, my jacket kind of blowing in the wind, with a Dylan thrown in there, is cower, is Corgur Sowell Guffrey, though the Kinnin May. So he's jealous of Goffrey and de Kinnin, who would be new poets on the scene. I think that would be the crack there. And Nargao Soramson, Connor Darvurnio May, like, don't I remember the good corner I was reared in? Kosher fullest that in this, there was loads of great poetic parties in the house he grew up in, because Andries Macrutin was one of the Macrutin, a clan of bards, like what was talked about earlier. And indeed, relations of his then was Ebui Macrutin and Seamus Macrutin. And a descendant of theirs again was one of the last of the bards of Thomond of the Macrutin clan, and he wrote in English. And I always thought that's really interesting when it moved from Irish to English. It's a bit like now when people say, you have to get on Instagram, and you go, I don't want to do all that shite. But if you don't, you get lost. So you could just imagine this family of bards that always had this Irish language. And then suddenly they were told, well, when I went to a scríb in Merla, like if you don't start writing in English, you're not going to get the gig. So I thought that was interesting, from that point of view. And the last line there, oil straw for fulla will re-rail. The more chlocht culla than our fella with the Philly direct would be the master poets. And then the last line is goes, O toga me chan budach go Kilkee me, take me from this place back to Kilkee, because in Kilkee was the bards, actually the McDonald's. It's funny because when we do the kids, they go, oh yeah, is there a McDonald's in Kilkee? We say, well, no, we don't mean the burger and chips McDonald's, but it is interesting. Because, earlier when I had dinner with the poets, and they say, that when accountants get together, they talk about art. When artists get together, they talk about money. And the conversation was, oh yeah, did you get published? Did you get that arts grant? Isn't it terrible that such a one didn't get the Turing Award, And yet, like 300 years ago, it's the same shite. He's given out that, his patron, whoever they were, have now given work to Goffrey and de Kinnin, and he wants to go back to his old patron in Kilkee. So I just thought that was interesting. So Shinny and Dawn Shin, it's more Mogunas or Aindrias Macrutin or Maggie. Time for one more story. We'll do another story. We could do you want to do, okay, I'll do, seeing as we're in Munster, I might do one from Kerry. Or do you want one about the fairies in Mayo? We've only time for one now. Kerry, okay. Okay. It was after Finn McCool and the Fianna had defeated the King of the World's army. And the King of the World's army were retreating back to Andawan Her, the Eastern world, wherever it was the King of the World came for him them days, Greece or Egypt, somewhere down that side. And the King of the World was retreating back, badly bet. Finn McCool and the Fianna had well defeated the Battle of Intry it was. After the Battle of Intry, and there was very few survivors of the King of the World's army, those that scuttled onto the boats and headed back to Andawan Her. But there was one that was left. It was a young girl called Mish. Mish was her name. And she was the King of the World's daughter. Sure, the king of the world himself must have thought she was dead, with so many others of his side that died in that terrible tragedy on the Battle of Aindrias. And while Finn McCool and the Fianna were there celebrating all over that part of Kerry, this young girl, Mish, saw with sadness in her heart as the boats retreated and she was left. She wandered up. Across the bay from Fianna is a big mountain, and into that mountain she wandered. And wilder she became over the years. 'Tis said that she lived inside in that mountain for 300 years. 300 blin of Ishian. And wilder she got all the time. Her hair grew long, her nails grew long. She became a savage beast above in the hill. Mish, you could hear Mish at night. You could hear the And soon it was that people were afraid to go up in the mountain. Sheep were gone missing in the middle of the night. Less and less people would go for a walk on this mountain, for they would hear the sound of the And then cattle went missing, and sure enough, soon cattle herds wouldn't bring their cattle up there for winterage. Shepherds wouldn't bring their sheep. People wouldn't walk. Nobody could go up to this mountain. The mountain of Mish, Slieve Mish, became known as a wild place that no one could go up, for it was inhabited by this beast, this crazy beast of a woman. I live in Clare, and we've got this tradition of the wild women of the burn. So, you know, when people go out the country and just go pure wild, we've all done it for a day or two, but in this case it was 300 years, so it was the full tilt. She fear Fion, like fully wild. Anyway, after a while the king noticed that, you know, this terrible affliction of this wild beast in the mountain was affecting the commerce in the village. People were afraid to come near the mountain, and villagers were afraid to go out at night. It was the rumours and the fear of Mish was spreading all over the place. So he said, 40 guineas of gold I will give to anyone who can go to the mountain and rid us of this terrible affliction. So one brave young man came up and he said he'd go up anyway. And up he went to the mountain, and then he was never seen again. So the king decided, oh, surely someone else would go, but nobody would go out to the mountain. And then after a while he said, 80 guineas of gold I will give for anyone who can go and rid us of this terrible affliction. No one go. Next thing, these three lads landed anyway. They must come down from North Kerry, from Lishdole, good footballers. One lad had a big sword, another lad had a big spear, and the other lad had a big axe. They'd go. They were all kind of guys now to be playing midfield for, I don't know, Dingle or Lishdole, real Kerry men, you know. And young lads full of testosterone, you know. Ball bag swinging like a church bell ringing, you know. They were up like ready for it. Just they'd go and they'd take it, and the big brandishing their big tools and the big swords, and they're all ready for it. Up they went to the mountain. Up. How. They were never seen again. I know. Tragedy. But then one evening, and it must have been around this time of the year, it was around the end of November, it was an evening like this evening, oh, grand soft night, no major rain. Who should come to town? Only this bard by the name of Dovrish. He was called Dovrish because he had long dark hair. Sure, like a bit like that now. The old Timothy shampoo. And he came in and he carried a harp on his back. He carried in his harp, and he plunked his harp down in the village and started to play. And he played this music, it went. And the people from around the village, they sat around and they listened to this lovely music. Nobody was looking at their phones. They were all really attentive and listening to the music, which the bard liked. You know, he liked the attention. And he played into the evening anyway. And he continued to play. And next thing he noticed a huge crowd around him. And they were all listening. And he had his cap on the ground, but of course it was in Kerry, so there wasn't a whole lot of money in the cap. You know? They were waiting for the busload of Yanks to come up from Killarney, I suppose. Yeah. And it was around this time of the night then when he decided, you know, he needed lodgings, he needed food. So somebody said, but you're a bard that has played all the great castles. You've played in Dromoland you've played for Finn McCool and the Fianna. You've played all these great venues. Surely you just go up to the local king's castle and he may give you lodgings. So he went up. And as he was going up then, he heard about this 80 guineas of gold that he could get. So the king brought him in and he got lodgings for the night. But The next morning, Dovrish was in, but King, I've heard about, the 80 guineas of gold, and if I could go to the mountain and rid you of the terrible affliction of the beast. And the king said, ha, a bard like you, what could you possibly do? This is a wild beast in the mountain. Nothing you could do could help us. And Dovrish said, sure, give me the 80 pieces. And I say, I know your types. Wandering bard, lachico, vagabond, troubadour. You wandering around, I give you the 80 pieces of gold, you'll never be seen again. And he said, you disappear with the money. It's a bit like, the county council derelict house grant. It's paid retrospectively. You do the gig and then you might get the money. So wouldn't give him any money anyway. So then the king said, look what he said, I'll give you 4. I'll give you 4 pieces of gold. So Dovrish, he wrapped up the 4 pieces of gold in his cloak and he headed off with his harp and he went up the mountain. And it was a grand day, but all the time as he was climbing this mountain, he could sense that a presence was watching him. He could feel trees and bushes moving. The lovely hazel trees that are up the mountain. And as he got higher into the mountain where the shkiach, the fine hawthorn trees, were circling the summit of the mountain, there was kind of like a battleite, kind of a flat plain of stone. And by the time he got there, he could definitely feel there was a presence watching. Now, he was a bard who had played all the great castles and knew when he had an attentive audience. So sure enough, he took out the harp and he played through the night. And he played a tune by the light of the moon. And then by the morning, as the lark started to sing, and the music of the lark started to kind of tune in with Dovrish's harp, for they too loved music. We all know how birds love to do that, especially in those days. Larks could sing in the key of C. And they joined in, and sure enough, the more he kept playing, the more the birds and the bees were listening and buzzing around him. He felt the presence of the wild beast coming closer and closer and closer. But Dovrish didn't move, he just kept playing. And as I said, he was a bard that had played for all kinds, so he was confident with his music. And then suddenly when he stopped, he looked at her. And she looked at the harp and she said, what's that? And he said, oh, this is music. And she said, I remember music. I mean, she was the king of the world's daughter. She would have heard, the finest music from Greece to Egypt and the Dow and Hair in the Eastern world. And the music was bringing her back. And even as she looked into the rising sun, he could see a change in the color of her eyes, as if the beastly anger was leaving her for some sentimental seconds. And then the sun rose in the sky and it shone down on the cloak where Dovrish had laid out the 4 pieces of gold, each in a corner of the cloak. And as the sun shone to the gold, she picked up the gold and she said, what's that? He said, oh, this is gold. And she said, oh, I remember gold. Even in those days, some women liked money and gold. So she looked, and as the sun shone into the gold, it kind of dazzled her. And again, the color came back into her eye. He noticed she had that beautiful green eye. It was green that spiraled into a brown, like a side profile of a round bale that you'd see today. It was this beauty. And he started to see a queer beauty in her eye. And then he continued to play. But he dared not say too much to her. And then she looked down. And there, between his legs, she said, what's that? And he had an implement. And he said, oh, this is a trickery stick. What does it do? So he showed her what he could do with the trickery stick. Enjoyed the trickery stick. So then she said, let's do it again. So they did more tricks with the trickery stick. trickery stick. And he said, no, come on, I'm not 21. We'll do it again in the morning. And the morning came, and she said, trickery stick. And he said, well, I'm hungry. So she ran into the woods, and she came back with a deer on her shoulder, and he threw down the deer, and she was about to tear into it with her bare hands. And he said, no, we don't eat like this in civilized society. So he took out a little frying pan, and they put on a little fire, and they started to eat the venison and the veal and the good meats. And she suddenly remembered what it was like to eat cooked food. And gently then he was able, as they were eating, to kind of comb out of her hair the lumps of briars and thorny rushes and seaweed. And as he threw it into the bushes like this, with the bits of meat that they didn't eat and the bones, he threw them into the bushes, into the hawthorn and into the hazel. And then the birds came to sing and eat the feed with them. And then they went for a drink of water in the well. And there's a famous well down there, as you all know, Tubber na Galt. Galt is an Irish word for a mad person, like a gal. Shuck is the madhouse. There's actually, isn't there a March, Diron poem that goes, we fun you've sturm a jerry rare about the Shuck and the mad energy of it. Yeah. Sean Reardon, is it? Thank you, Cormac. Sean Reardon, yeah, what is it? Shuck Yes, Sinead Gajirach, yeah. So again, this madness and craziness that she had was somehow subdued and dealt with when they started to drink the Tubber na Galt. No, it may sound like a funny comment, but scientifically proven that there's a lot of lithium in Tubber na Galt, isn't there? Yeah, so it's called, and there's lithium and sulfur, which, as we all know, you need sometimes to kind of relax the dopamine receptors in the brain. I've just read a lot of books in COVID about ADHD, so forgive me. So anyway, they drank this lovely water, and sure enough, again, the calming effect came over her, played more music, and then that night, they did another trick with the trickery stick. Of the early morning, as the dew fell, they noticed that the trees all around them, where they had thrown the bits of seaweed that he combed out of her hair, were now lush with fruit. Yes, the birds and the bees had come in to join in the feast, and as they woke up, he had cut her hair, he had trimmed her nails and the toenails, pedicure, manicure, and he took her by the hand, and they walked down the mountain into the town. And the people of the town looked and said, oh my God, where did Dovrish find this amazingly beautiful woman? Who is this person? Unrecognizable she was to the villagers. And the king said, oh yes, Dovrish, I have something for you. It was 76 pieces of gold. I'm a man of my word, and I shall give you the money, and we'll settle our accounts. And Dovrish said, no, king, I don't need your pieces of gold, for I have found in yonder mountain a love so bold, worth more money than gold. I have found the real essence of what life and music is all about. And the people prayed and a party and great crack, and they did a bit of a ceilidh that night in the town. And then in the morning, Dovrish and Mish, and to this day that mountain is still called Slieve Mish, isn't it? But they walked back up that mountain. They disappeared over the hill. They were never seen again. Thanks. Thank you very much. Big thanks to Paul and all the gang. No avail.
Margaret, Aindrias. That was great, guys, wasn't it? What a way to finish off for Saturday night. I bet you're glad you didn't go to the pub now, the boring old smelly pub. That was lovely. Yeah, so we have time for quick Q&A before we wrap up tonight. I'm going to welcome Kim Shuck back via Zoom if she's here. Yeah. Hello, how are you? And also just a big hello and welcome to anybody joining us live online as well. So I'm going to shoot a question to Kim first. And actually tonight, Kim is reading as part of a Cork and San Francisco twin poetry exchange. And Aindrias mentioned his connection with San Francisco as well, which is a nice coincidence. So I suppose, Kim, in light of that, I wanted you to maybe enlighten us a bit about San Francisco, and particularly your relationship to the city as a poet, maybe how it might have influenced you or supported you, um, inspired you? I know you were the Port Laureate for the city as well, so is that something you want to tell us more about?
Well, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and so was my mom. My parents met here, and I know it. The city that I know is different from the city that you'd meet if you came now. But gosh, how does it support me? So, I was a kid when there were still a number of beat poets around. I knew a lot of the folks whose names you know and have heard, and got to listen to them read. And you know, we're an odd bunch, poets. And I have stories about all of them. Some of them are good, and some of them are creepy. I don't know. There was always a problem in the city, as far as I could tell, which was that there were a number of poets who were kind of set above everybody else, and then there was never any place for folks to read if they weren't part of the big group. And for whatever reason, luck or whatever, I was always they always used to let me read with the boys, and so when I was laureate, I made sure that there was space for folks you might not have heard of to read, and that's always been pretty wonderful. Because I like listening to the people who might not be famous yet. Yeah, this San Francisco supports writers in part. You're a multilingual festival. One of the reasons that San Francisco has so many writers, I think, is because although there was a racial hegemony, there is never a cultural hegemony. So I could walk you through San Francisco and we would hear more languages than you'd recognize the differences between. So mean, we had neighbors when I was a kid who spoke Irish, in fact, and so that was sort of interesting. A language you wouldn't necessarily hear in the city. I don't know. Have I answered it? I'm not sure. It's a great city. It's beautiful, and it's too expensive now, and there are a lot of empty places that people come and stay in for 3 days a year, and then they scoot off to wherever they're from. Most of the time, and leave the place empty. And I think it's a shame, because you can't create community with empty houses. But apart from that, I love the city, and I think all we really need is a medium-sized earthquake to terrify the people who are prone to terror, and then they'll leave, and we can have our city back.
Thanks so much, Kim. Interesting to hear about that. I'm keen that it's late and it's Saturday, so I'm going to move on to Aindrias next with another question. And I suppose there's so much variety between the two performances tonight, and I was thinking about how I suppose we can receive poetry in so many different ways. I mean, primarily orally and visually, but we all do experience it in different ways and produce it in different ways. So it was nice to see both sides of that tonight. And with the storytelling, I suppose it's a bit more of a rarity than poetry at the moment. I think after watching you perform, it's hard to imagine you do anything else but storytelling. I don't know. And I'm going to maybe say something, and my question is whether you agree with me or not, I suppose. And I think it's so enjoyable watching that performance, so entertaining. You almost feel childlike being entertained by something like that. Maybe for some of us, if we're lucky, the last time we were really told or read stories when we were children as well. Um, sorry, I'm digressing now, but I suppose there always feels it's such a special thing culturally for us, and I always get the feeling that storytelling, Irish storytelling, is covers a lot of very very important, very sensitive subjects, but in the guise of a very entertaining, light-hearted way. Agree or disagree?
Sorry, what's the question, just ask me the question again.
Do you think you deal with important subjects but layer them with this sort of entertaining, light-hearted way? Or I suppose, yeah, what's your kind of purpose for your
Okay.
storytelling?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And that is a good question. Do you deal with... Yeah, there was times when we were doing a big story recently, the excerpt of the Battle of Mytura, and it was difficult for me to do that while, the trouble in Palestine was kicking off, because in the Battle of Mytura, you have the Firbolgs, the native tribe, and then the Tuatara Command, they've got all this extra magic and technology. And I found it, I said, it was hard to do that, without alluding to it. And even in the start of Slieve Mish, we talk about this girl who's seen the horror and war and trauma. And sometimes if it's like Saturday night and we're out, you can just call it, that they did that about. But sometimes you can take a moment to say, and you can understand. We know, some of us may know what it may have been like for this woman who was seeing this terrible war and trauma. And yeah, so you can kind of do it like that. And I suppose maybe I rushed, I wasn't sure where I was going for time there. But sometimes at the end of that story, when I've seen, like you've probably seen it when I did it in Tralee, there's a bit where we kind of go, so if you know someone that has gone a bit wild and their nails are gone long and they're rough, they might just need a hug. So I suppose sometimes it depends whether you want, sometimes you don't need to spell it out to an audience. Like I imagine here, a poetry, you can get the message of that story is that it was, and what I like about, I would say with the example of Slieve Mish, that it's not just that the bard came up and played music and then he cured her. He kind of had to go the next step of like cutting her nails and combing the dirt out of the hair, because, even today when I left here and I was walking across town, I joined in the Palestinian parade and I was thinking, I want to do more than just protest. I want to do more than just walk through the town, and even though I'm doing some of the gigs, I said, I want to do more than that. But then if you do more than that and start, burning things, then you're seen as being on the other side, like we had the trouble in Dublin the other night. So I suppose when you said that you couldn't imagine me doing anything other than storytelling, it's because there's not many other things I'm able to do outside of storytelling. And in school, I wasn't so good at football and hurling, even though I was tall. And then with music, I kind of got bored of Irish music, just the jigs and reels all the time. I used to be kind of like jumping up on the table and doing extra things, and it looked like it was just showing off and looking for attention, because the beauty of the Irish session is that we're all in it together, So when I started over the years to accidentally discover storytelling, it was something that could channel that, and it could kind of, there is moments in stories, to go back to answer your question, where you do things like I had a show called The Man from Mugaga, was a storytelling piece that went out on national radio, and there was one of the characters in it was quite suicidal, and I had to do that at the time. I had a lot of friends and family that it was just one of those years, 2008, 2009, just a lot of people close to me just happened to leave via suicide, and I had to I knew I had to write something about it. I had seen this play, I think it's called Mr. Men by Enda Walsh, and it just the main character just died in the end of it by suicide. And I just thought, that's not good enough for me. I need something. Now, fair enough, it was a remount of something that was written in the 80s or the 90s. But I felt that we needed something new. So even though I didn't want to write about that, but I could not do it. Or often I'd be doing it in public and I'd be thinking, oh, Jesus, such a one is there and they've lost somebody, and such a one, I'll try and change it. But the more I'd be trying to steer away from it, the more it would go back to it. So I think that sometimes, we're guided to talk about the things we don't want to talk about by something deeper than the logic of the mind. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone. Or an audience can sense as well if you're dodging a certain issue, and what happens then is you slow down, and so because for me anyway, storytelling comes from the gut and from the stomach more so than the head. You know, sometimes, all right, if I'll get lost, I just play a tune, and while I'm in the tune, I'll be thinking, what am I going to say next? But most of the time, it seems to come from, I suppose, from life experience. But yeah, I suppose fables and folklore usually are a message wrapped up in kind of colour and entertainment, which a lot of art can be and should be. It's a way of passing on a message, isn't it? Or dealing with an issue. Thanks.
That's great. I think we are okay for time. I'm just going to give, if there's anyone with a burning question for either poet, just want to give you an opportunity. Pose it now. No, okay. So, two things. Our lovely merch stand is still open, and have you seen the Ovale merch this year? OMG, we're all going to be sporting the style, and there's I don't believe there's any merch from either of tonight's poets, but from the rest of the weekend there's plenty. So you'll have a chance to look through that today or tomorrow. We're kicking off at 11 a.m. with the Poetry Films. Perfect event to crawl into in the morning, and you'll get to witness some of the selection, and actually the winner as well of the competition this year will be announced. So some serious work going to be on show here in the morning, and we'll be running until about 7 or 8 tomorrow evening. So very welcome back. And now we are ready to feed you, give you drinks, give you an opportunity to chat. We're going to go over to the Long Valley as usual, the Hayloft, which is about a 6-minute walk from here if you're strolling. There'll be some pizzas, some vegetarian meat. You'll all be fed, but you'll have to buy your own drinks and buy each other drinks as well. So I'm going to close up the night. Thank you so much again to our guests tonight. Another round of applause, please. Okay, so thank you so much. Good night. See you tomorrow.